Welcome to Conversations After Stroke. In this series, we interview experts and peers on topics of interest to young stroke survivors in British Columbia. Young stroke survivors have priorities, needs, and interests that are different from the typical stroke survivor demographic. We hear from younger stroke survivors that most information, programs, and services for stroke recovery are designed with older adults in mind, and they're not always relevant and appealing to working age stroke survivors. So these conversations after stroke are an effort to bridge some of that gap. You should always consult your doctor or other healthcare professional about what's best for you and your recovery. The content provided here is for your information only. The Conversations After Stroke series is presented in partnership by the Stroke Recovery Association of BC and March of Dimes Canada. Together, we deliver After Stroke, programs and services to help stroke survivors reach individual goals for recovery and get back to life after stroke. The following conversation about sexual health after stroke is intended for an adult audience. Viewer discretion is advised. Today's conversation is about sexual health and intimacy after stroke, and I'm very pleased to welcome Rachel Nicoletti and Shay Hakalowski. They're both sexual health clinicians with the GF Strong Rehab Center and the Blessing Spinal Cord Center, both in Vancouver. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, so my first question, what is a sexual health clinician and how did you both get started in the role?
Want me to start with that one? Sexual health clinician, so we're nurses by background. And clinician just means that we see clients on a one-to-one basis, provide education and one-on-one support. How did we get into it? I got into it a really long time ago, so 15 years ago now, with an idea of really liking health promotion, so education on how to keep people healthy. And I was working with Planned Parenthood at the time, which is now Options for Sexual Health. I've always had a keen interest in the sexual area.
Neat. Great. Rachel.
I, previous to this, was working in a couple different roles in sexual health. So I was working in the community with youth at a primary care clinic, doing work around STIs and contraception and education. And then I also was actually working for a research project for 5 years that worked with women involved in sex work. So sexual health has also been an interest of mine, and really happy to be where I am now and continually learning and working with individuals with disabilities and health conditions and promoting sexual health in that area.
Great, good. Okay, so and I know that the program that you're involved with is pretty unique in Canada. So can you tell me a little bit about it and how and when it got started?
So our service actually started in 1975 with our founder, Dr. George Saz, who's an amazing man. He worked in spinal cord medicine and kind of had this epiphany and had noticed a gap in service that people weren't being asked about their sexual health, but there were some questions that were coming up and he didn't really know how to answer them, and so he did a bit of a poll, I think, with the healthcare providers and the clients it was in Shaughnessy at the time.
Okay.
Saying, asked patients if they would like to be asked, and they all said yes, then asked all the healthcare professionals if they were asking, and they all said no. And so the sexual health rehab service was born through that, to say how to get clinicians, a group of clinicians together with him to start addressing this area.
Okay. Good. Okay, and so what services do you provide?
Yeah, so we provide a range of services. I would say like our meat and potatoes are really the one-on-one work that we do with clients. So it ranges from seeing clients when they're in their initial stages of rehabilitation and providing them education on physiologically the changes that may have happened depending on the reason that we're seeing them, so around sexual function, fertility, and then really providing them a sense of hope for the future, in that we do see clients with all types of illnesses and disabilities and health conditions go on to have satisfying sexual lives, and that it is a possibility for them, and that we are there, and that they may not be ready at that time, but in the future they can reach out to us again and have support in that area. And so just validating that it is still an important part of life.
So it's not uncommon for us to see maybe someone very short for a short amount of time of the initial injury and then not hear from them for a while and then come back a couple of years later. And so we do see people throughout the lifespan.
Right.
So they can access us multiple times over.
Because your life
changes.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. And so the services that you provide, is it just for people in the Vancouver area or Vancouver Coastal Health, or could anybody from BC contact?
We are a provincial service, so
Okay.
we will see anybody from the province, and we get around that by using the phone. So
Right.
instead of doing telehealth or Skype, we do most of our stuff if they're from outlying communities, and travel is difficult over the phone.
Okay, great.
And just to backtrack a little bit in terms of the services we provide, so there's the one-to-one, but we also, I think it's important to note that we do have a sperm retrieval clinic
Okay.
here at the Blessed Spinal Cord Center for individuals who have trouble with ejaculation and
Or wanting to start a family.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I think that's, and then obviously education and research. So we are involved in lots of different projects that are helping to, like sort of create guidelines to help, like for lactation and breastfeeding and spinal cord injury, really to sort of get projects off the ground to kind of help the care of people with not only spinal cord injuries but any neurological.
Right.
So we're really cool to be able to collaborate internationally, go to conferences and talk about our stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be cool. Great. Okay, perfect. And I'm interested to know, when you work with your clients, what are your overall principles or goals? So what guides what you do?
Well, we do kind of operate on the sexual health rehabilitation principles,
Okay.
which are 3 principles. One being maximizing potential, so
Okay.
working with what people have and maximizing that, adapting to limitations, and then the biggest thing is to remain open-minded.
Right.
So those are the 3 principles.
Yeah, I think that probably those principles would apply to rehabilitation in general,
Mm-hmm.
and they're easy to say,
Yeah.
not so easy necessarily for every person to take on, and I think that for some it takes a little bit of time, and that's okay, and that if you are willing to try and get support from different areas and different disciplines that are helping you in rehabilitation, then you can get there.
I think the biggest thing for what we do is meet people where they're at. So depending on their readiness, some people are really out of the gates, want to have a whole bunch of questions and want to talk really openly about it. Others aren't even too sure what their
What to
concerns
ask.
are, and haven't been out, living life
Yeah.
with a stroke, for instance, for very long, so don't really know what they're going to run into.
Right.
And so as clinicians, we don't sort of shove information down people's throat. We just sort of wait and see. We provide a whole plethora of stuff that people do potentially have questions about, and then let people kind of gauge what they want to know from there.
Yeah, and we really try to work in conjunction with our peers, so we may see someone and it's easy to say, you need to be open-minded, you need to, but if that individual maybe has some life experiences that didn't really allow for them to develop that inherent characteristic, there could be some potential in going to see psychology or going for some counseling out in the community perhaps to help them unpack some of that stuff that may be going on for them that may be a barrier for them to progressing in rehab and coming to terms with their injury or their limitations. So
I think we're quite lucky in the fact that we're able to look at the whole person.
Yeah.
So we can't just look at the genitals. When we're looking at sexual function, we have to look at what's going on with bowel bladder, what's going on in relationships, what's going on with self-esteem, what's going on in terms of hormonal things, other general health concerns. And so we get to kind of back up and look at everything, and so we
Right.
often are able to pick up on some of the gaps. So urological care, if someone's having bladder issues that haven't been addressed, or pain issues or fatigue issues and things like that, so being able to pluck items and being able to get them referred and seen by other healthcare providers as well.
Right. Okay. I mean, on the one hand, it sounds a lot like, as you said,
most rehab professionals, the way that you're approaching it and meeting people where they are and looking at the whole person. If someone's working on their gait or their speech or whatever it is, it sounds very similar. But then on the other hand, I think sexual health has a lot of other stuff behind it, right?
Not everybody's comfortable talking about this area. There's a lot of preconceived ideas of what we might be talking about, or beliefs that kind of come in can kind of get in the way of, I didn't think people who had a stroke were that sexual after their stroke, but I still feel like I want to be sexual, and so having this sort of play of, well, does that mean I'm asexual now?
Right.
And so helping people kind of have those conversations and kind of unpack all of that. We get the privilege of being able to do that.
Wow. Yeah.
We feel very honored, right? we work with people, with their closest and most intense emotions.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I want to go next. So we talked a little bit about some things that might be relevant for rehab in general, but now I want to talk a little bit about sexual health. So I think most people, they know what sex is and they think about sex, but they might not think about sexual health. And so tell me a little bit about what sexual health means.
Want to go with that one?
Sure. I think that there's many different definitions for sexual health out there. There's one by the World Health Organization that we use often. The World Health Organization says that sexual health is the integration of the physical, emotional, intellectual, and social aspects of sexual being in ways that are positively enriching and that enhance personality, communication, and love. So
that just shows how complex it is, right? That it isn't just one sentence.
Yeah.
So again, we're painting this with a very holistic brush.
Sure.
Sexual health isn't just about the genitals. It isn't about being free of STDs, or it isn't just about contraception. It's really about our whole being as a person. And I think that human beings inherently have some type of sexuality within them, and express that in different ways. And I think that being sexually healthy just means that you feel good and you feel okay in your ability to express yourself sexually the way you want to.
Right.
Whatever that might mean for you. It may mean that you are having sex. It may mean that you're not having sex. And as long as you are able to express yourself the way that you feel comfortable.
Right.
Well, and that can even mean like how you dress and how you do your hair and the little things that you kind of do for yourself that make you feel good, how you interact with people.
Right.
There's so much to it that isn't really just the intercourse piece, but we tend to focus so much of our attention on that when we think about sex or sexual health. Yeah.
Right. Well, and that's a really interesting perspective, I think, because stroke survivors, as we all know, there's a number of different effects of stroke. So there's the physical effects, there's the cognitive effects, there's emotional, there's social and communication, and all of those ways that people can be affected by stroke, you're now describing, they're also all part of sexual health.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow.
And sometimes all those other things that you might not think right away, that are apart from the act of sex itself, are even more important.
Yes.
Right? They're more affected.
Yes.
How you communicate with someone, if that's affected, then that really can have a diminishing effect on your self-esteem. It might affect the way you socialize with people, create some social isolation, and that also does not great things for your mood.
Yeah.
And so addressing all of that can turn things around a bit.
I mean, I wouldn't speak for men, but I think that most women would agree that those things are probably more important, right?
Yeah. And there is that stereotypical gender, but men would, when we finally get to the meat and potatoes of what's going on, we're looking at erectile function, but then it also, what does all mean?
Right.
And oftentimes there
For
is
the
sort
person.
of that, the personal confidence type stuff too that comes into play.
Okay, so this is probably a dumb question, and you've probably answered it, but it's something that I'm interested in hearing from you because I've heard you describe it before. So tell me why sexual health is so important for people.
Yeah, so there's a number of
Yeah,
reasons. Is that
collect dots.
another question that we could talk about at length?
Uh-huh.
I think that really the most important is the sense of connection that comes from being intimate with another human. I think that's at the core of really what we all need and crave for as human beings, is social connection and intimacy, and that's really what it all comes down to. Beyond that, there are endorphins that are involved with not only sexual acts, but also giving somebody a hug,
Right.
kissing your partner, cuddling your partner. There can be effects that reduce pain as well. So there's many different things involved there.
Like we see for people who all their touch is medical, right? So in the hospital, all the touch is medical. It turns out it kind of changes experiences, and so trying to get back some of that touch is pleasurable, and it is a connection, and it's something that we do crave. When that's lost, then people do have, implications for mood, depression, isolation, like I've said before. So I'm kind of repeating myself, but that need for connection and socialization is so important.
Right. Okay, great. Okay, so now we're talking specifically about stroke survivors, and I've already mentioned, and you guys already know, some of the ways that stroke can affect people. So I thought it might be helpful to run through some of the ways that stroke affects people, and you could talk a little bit about how that might affect sexual health. And we might be repeating some of what we've already said, but we'll still go for it. So physical changes after stroke. So one-sided weakness or paralysis. How would physical effects of stroke affect people's sexual health?
Well, there's lots of ways it can affect it, right? It can be with just feeling confident in your own body with something not being the same as it was before. So with weakness, it changes your appearance, right? It also changes the way you're able to move, the way you're able to touch someone, the way you're able to kind of be in your own body. So there's multiple things that can change, and I hate to just focus on all the things that are bad.
Okay.
Right?
That's fair point.
Physical changes. I mean, it's going to change. It's just trying to figure out, what you can do, and then, like we had talked about before, maximizing that. So, focus on the hand that works better, and try to, even like for positioning and things like that, if one side is weaker, then trying to focus all your attention on using the stronger, even if they're not the most dominant, right? If it's not your dominant hand, then you're still able to use it. There's still more grip, there's still more everything, and so focusing on the aspects of the physicality that they can do.
Right.
Yeah, I think that another perspective that's important to recognize is the barriers to accessing places where you may have gone before to meet people, to socialize with people. So maybe it was something that you did every Friday night, to go to a certain pub or bar and chat with friends and meet people, and that place isn't accessible anymore. So to overcome something like that, we really encourage individuals to meet with peers and really go out and explore and try to find out where is accessible, where can they go, where can they still connect and interact with people. And it's something that's easy to say, but it can be scary putting yourself out there and going to new places.
Because of the vulnerability.
Yeah.
Right? So.
And then again, I think another thing that people can do is to look at what their preconceived ideas and notions are of things like masculinity. Like, we know in society that a big idea about what it means to be masculine is to be strong and strapping and to
the sole breadwinner.
Right.
All those roles.
So when you have a physical disability, and one that's likely visible as well, right, that can really affect your sense of masculinity and your sense of self, and so that can take a little bit of time to address. It's not so easy as going to a physiotherapy appointment, but
Right.
being able to change your mindset and perspective and thinking about that on a new level.
Yeah. Wow, there's a lot going on with sexual health.
Yeah.
I thought we were just going to talk about sex.
Nope, usually that's only like a small thing.
Yeah.
Gotta get through a lot to get there, right?
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. Cognitive changes after somebody's had a stroke, so challenges with memory or understanding.
Or impulsivity,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So
behavioral
sometimes people,
changes. Yeah.
personality changes,
Yeah.
their behavior changes. There can be some safety implications with that, with impulsivity, making choices and things that you may not have normally done. It's again, we have to like flip it and say, okay,
Yeah.
we have to work with what. Yes, there's changes to cognition, and trying to figure out where on the spectrum you fall, and try to find supports and ways for memory, ways for safety, ways for communication that are going to enhance
Right.
connection.
Right. Okay.
I don't know, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that this is one of those areas where we really rely on the interdisciplinary team to help
Okay,
out in maximizing that person's function, and also working with families. So that's something we didn't really mention, is we'll often meet with partners or family, because it's really something that affects everyone in that person's life when there is a significant cognitive effect. So if somebody has a partner and they're unable to maybe play the same role in the relationship as they did before and do the same things they did at home, it's going to affect that person's partner and the whole family and all of those dynamics. And it's providing a space to talk about that and to give some strategies to really address ways to bring that sentiment out into the open, put it out on the table, how is everybody feeling, and say that this is normal. Like most families and couples will go through a period of readjustment and coping, and how do we make this work for your unique situation. Yeah.
And probably when it comes to sexual health, like just getting it out in the open and talking about it is half the battle, right?
Absolutely.
What you said earlier, that people all have these questions and they really want to know, but they never get asked.
Yeah, looking at the balance of caregiving and just giving couples an opportunity and a space to talk. And we're not counselors. Oftentimes that line is a little bit blurred, but just providing that opportunity and that validation that this is an important area to talk about, and you wouldn't believe the things that come out. Just providing that space. So
when people are feel like when they have a safe place provided to them to talk about this area, there's a lot of relief, and so then it's just like you can download that and talk about it with someone and feel like you're listened to. Sometimes even if it doesn't change, that already is therapeutic in and of itself. Especially when we're talking about cognitive changes, like having family have education about what this might look like. What some cognitive changes are quite minor, but they have a big impact, and they can have an impact in a relationship that only like the close people around them see.
Right.
And so having to be an advocate as well for your spouse to sort of say, well, wait a second, there is something else kind of going on, and also knowing the resources to access.
Right.
Because they're not always well advertised.
They are not. That is beyond this conversation about sexual
exactly,
health. That
exactly.
is something
but
that
it is
we
important,
hear.
right? So having further support is oftentimes beyond what we're able to do, and a lot of topics come up, because we're a safe place, and so we have to figure out and help finding support for those places that we can't do.
Good. Okay, we've actually covered most of these. Maybe I'll just speak, if you had anything else to add about communication difficulties. So people, whether it's aphasia, so they have challenge communicating or understanding, or if it's more about some of the things that we've already touched on, just because of the changes in the relationship, challenges in communicating with your partner, because things are different now. I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to add about how that might affect sexual health and what are some of the things we can do.
I would just say, I can't remember who I heard speaking and say this, but so much emphasis on relationships is put on communication, verbal communication, but that's not always the way that couples connect.
Right. That's a very good point. Yeah.
And I don't want to underplay the impacts that, you know, aphasia and difficulties with verbal communication would have in a relationship, but I think that it's important to say that a lot can be communicated with physical touch, a certain look you give your partner, and so working on that side of things can be quite significant, and there can be a lot that can be said without words.
I would agree. I remember in my early days when I was working at GF and meeting a lovely couple who had been together for a really long time, and so they knew each other quite well, and he had really bad aphasia. Like, it was really difficult to understand, but they would look at each other, and he would give a look, and she would know.
Yeah.
Like, they developed a way of communication that they didn't really need to speak so much, but they kind of always had an idea of what each other were thinking or what he was thinking, so she could communicate quite well, and it worked. And I remember I just thinking they were such a great couple, and one that always comes back in my head with fond memories, because they could teach so many others about how to make it work. But I think it really has to do with how long someone's been in a relationship together, how well they know each other. You know, relationships are tough. The foundation of a relationship before something happens, so it depends on how many, you know, life-changing events you've been through and how you've been able to adapt and cope before you get to this point of having a loved one that has a stroke, and how you guys, how they are able to make it work, because sometimes couples aren't doing so well, and something happens, and all of those issues in the relationship that were there before, they almost are put under a microscope, and so they can get bigger. And we don't always like to talk about that sometimes relationships don't survive.
Well, relationships crumble for very
lots of different
reasons.
And stress, you know, is a huge part of a chronic illness or an accident that can happen, right? And so, you know, I don't want to sugarcoat everything. There are really difficult patches, but trying to find resources, trying to find ways of getting, you know, getting some counseling to get through, and trying to figure out if there is a resolve.
And I think that's maybe the really important takeaway, is that if where there's a will, there is a way. So I think maybe what some people find is, you know, they're having a hard time, and they don't know where to go. There's nowhere to go.
And a lot of guilt about it.
Yeah.
You know, guilt about changing, like the person that I love is different now.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you know, with personality changes and things like that, I don't know who they are anymore. And then feeling very isolated in not knowing where to put that, because it isn't something that's always easy to have with your partner.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're different.
Yeah.
Right? And so trying to have some access to counseling so that resentments don't build and divides don't get, you know, further apart.
Right. And I mean, I think that's probably, hopefully, something that could come out of this discussion that we're having right now, is just by providing this information that there is someone you can talk to, there is someone who can help.
And we may not have all the answers. Like, I don't even pretend to think I'm an expert, but it's a starting point, right? It's having you know, an ability to start to sort out what are the issues, and where you might be able to go.
Well, and I think a starting point is really what people need, right? They need to know there's somewhere they can go.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, let's talk about common assumptions about sex and intimacy. So you can tell me if these are truth or misconceptions.
Oh, okay.
It's like a game.
Okay.
People,
I think we played this one before.
I think maybe you gave me these common assumptions.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, okay. People with health challenges have no interest in sex or intimacy. Truth or myth?
Myth.
Surprise.
But it is, you know, to be fair, it is a common social misrepresentation, right? It is sort of, there isn't a lot of healthy relationships post-stroke, post-spinal cord injury out in the media that people see.
Right.
So it is assumed, you know, if you see somebody in a wheelchair or someone with a disability, that likely they're not sexual, and it isn't really until you have, you know, ability to really know somebody and really get the idea that maybe that isn't the case.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people don't have close people around them that have a disability.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so some of it is just pure ignorance.
Yeah.
And some of it is, society and media perpetuating this idea that it's just 25-year-olds with six packs who are having sex.
Right.
And I think that the tables are starting to turn a little bit on that. You do see more representation of individuals with health challenges and disability in the media now, having relationships, and you know, there'll be, you know, a few sex scenes maybe here or there, but it's still just a sprinkling.
Right.
Yeah.
People want to identify with others out in the world,
Yeah.
right? When they don't see that, then they think that that's not the case.
Yeah. Sex and desire should be spontaneous because that's the way that it happens for most people.
All right. This is one that we have a conversation with about a lot. Thinking like it isn't like the movies where people meet and then they're, you know, like as soon as they get through the door, they're ripping off everybody's clothes or each other's clothes. It doesn't really happen like that,
No.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
The movies are not real.
And when it does happen like that, the sex probably isn't even that good.
Yeah.
Because when it happens like that, you're not communicating about what you like, what your partner likes, what you're okay doing, what your partner's okay doing. Maybe you didn't shower that morning.
There is always, that's a good point, because there is always, you know, I have this, not argument, but I have this debate with people all the time, and it's like, well, no, it used to be so spontaneous. And I always sort of challenge that a bit and say, oh, come on, you sometimes know in the morning you put on your special pair of underwear, or you make sure you put a couple squirts of extra deodorant or you know, make sure your teeth are brushed before you go to bed. You know, we should do that anyways, but there are shaving legs or shaving faces. Like there's things, grooming and hygiene, that usually kind of get extra effort if you're thinking that it might.
So you're getting your body and your physical space ready too. Maybe your bedroom, you're making your bed and things like that. But then you're also getting your mind ready.
Yeah.
So you're thinking about what might be happening later that night, getting yourself a little bit more in the mood, and setting the scene. And if both partners know that that's going to be going on, then by the time it's time to spend some intimate quality time together, you're both where you want to be.
Yeah.
And so...
Well, the problem is it isn't always communicated, right? Yes. So one person has that desirous feeling, and the other person wasn't sure about that, wasn't having those same feelings, so then there's that.
It's always better to have a conversation. Yeah.
You know, and that's where maybe that spontaneity comes up, but it is mostly not as spontaneous as we would assume.
With stroke or any type of health condition, oftentimes there needs to be a little bit more planning. And I think it's because there needs to be a little bit more planning that people push back against it.
Right.
Because it's something that maybe they have to do now. They didn't have to do before, but we try to get them to look at it through the lens of this can be a really good thing, and this can actually make your sex life better. And I don't even want to say just sex. I think that we encourage people even just to plan for intimacy.
Right.
So having some time together to lie beside each other and cuddle, or maybe even just watch a movie but cuddle and hold hands. So not having that expectation always that sex needs to occur, but time to connect and spend together.
We do talk to people a lot about that. You know, oftentimes one person sitting in one chair, their chair, and it's not accessible, and the other person sitting on the other side of the room. So
that never happens in my house.
Simple things
You
like
just described my house.
like sitting together, or you know, like if there's children or animals, where do they sleep? Do they sleep with you in the bed? Is there ways, you know, to access your partner and those things, right? And so, you know, just having those discussions to make it doesn't mean you have to make life changing and it doesn't have to be all of the time. It just maybe once a week you decide, let's find a program that we like to watch together and let's do it on the couch. Like, well, our couch isn't very comfortable. And I say, well, maybe it's time to look at even just putting the 2 armchairs in closer together. It might not be the nicest, most aesthetically appealing in your living room, but you can move them back when company comes. But just to be a little bit closer.
Right.
And planning for the time of day when you're not going to be super fatigued. So if you know that by 7:30 you are falling asleep and you're just done for the day, maybe it's planning for a Saturday at 1 p.m. when you tend to have a little bit more energy.
Yeah.
As long as it's got more privacy then too.
Yeah.
Right? There's this idea that we have to have sex at night.
Because it's dark.
Right? But for most people, it's not the best time.
No, it really
because
isn't.
by the time you go to bed, you want to go to sleep.
Right.
And whatever else is going on in your life, it doesn't make for the most.
Mornings can be a great time for many people.
Yeah.
You wake up, you've got the most energy, you're well rested, hopefully. So
I think it depends. If one person is an early riser at 7 and someone else likes to sleep
Right.
in, there might be some discrepancies there, but it's all working with what works for couples. And we're also talking, we also talk a lot about couples, and I don't want to leave anybody out that doesn't, not in a relationship. But it's also being sexual with yourself and finding, if there's, creating that desire within your own self, and
Sure.
also
Yeah,
picking times of the day
everything.
that are better, that you have more energy, so it all can be applied
Right.
to individuals. It
Yeah,
doesn't have to be couples.
absolutely. I think that's almost even more important, connecting with yourself. And it may be connecting with yourself first, even if you are in a relationship. Maybe you've had a stroke and you're not quite sure about how your body's going to respond to physical touch yet. And instead of jumping into exploring with your partner, it might be a better idea first to see how things work with yourself.
Right.
Because you're taking away the anxieties of having another person there and not knowing how they're going to respond to that and what's going to happen. And
The nervousness of expectation.
Yeah.
if you think about how you learn about your body as a young person, for most people it's with themselves, and that's an easy and safe way to figure things out. So
Right. That's good advice.
yes.
You guys are a wealth of knowledge. Okay, this is my last truth or myth. Sexual activity must end in intercourse with great orgasms, or there is no point.
Oh, we can talk that. People think that people have to orgasm to make it like the most successful.
Right.
Both partners have to orgasm, and it has to be at the same time.
Right.
Yeah, usually to music, right? So it's
Yeah.
like,
Which,
yeah.
Again, it's sort of like the movies. It just isn't. It's what we see in the movies, but it isn't.
Right.
It isn't realistic, and that's what we see about humans. We're comparative in nature, right? So we always compare what we see to what we should be doing.
We want
And
to
those
be
are really
normal.
high. Those are really high expectations.
Yeah.
To have, I think the biggest thing is that we need to be just focused on pleasure. So at the end of an experience, we both feel satisfied, regardless of having orgasm or not, having that connection, feeling there's some closeness there. That's a win,
Right.
Yeah.
right? But
It's
we get all hung up on success and what it means to have good sex and what that all looks like, and it's going to be different for every couple, even.
Yeah. It's a really limiting frame of reference to go into a sexual experience thinking about what's going to happen at the end. It kind of negates all of the good stuff that happens before that.
Right. Right. Yeah.
We see that quite a bit in sort of fertility. So I see lots of different couples, and I even see people who don't have a disability but they're trying to conceive, and just the psychosocial pressures of trying to ejaculate. When you focus on the goal, that's all you see is you kind of lose sight of all of the niceties, and so
Enjoy the journey.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very a mindfulness-based perspective that we try to encourage. So mindfulness is huge these days. You hear it in healthcare more so now than ever, and mindfulness can be really helpful also in sexual health.
Right.
So just experiencing what physical or emotional sensation you're feeling in that moment without judgment. And then, of course, you're a human. You're going to have thoughts pop into your mind about, oh, my boss was talking to me about this the other day, or after this I need to go and get dog food. And just acknowledging, okay, I'm going to bring myself back in
Right.
my body, and what am I feeling right now,
Right.
and not thinking about, are we going to both orgasm at the exact same time at this moment in the song that's playing?
And I even think if we bring it back, as soon as there has been a challenge, so as soon as there's been an interaction that hasn't worked out so well,
Right.
it's very easy for the brain to creep in and say, what if it's going to happen again?
Yeah.
And the brain is quite powerful. It's actually your biggest sexual organ, right? So it's
Huh.
kind of everything gets filtered through this brain, and if it's not focused on being present and in the room, it has a really limiting factor. So
Yeah.
it's like the brain and the spinal cord. The spinal cord is the highway between the brain and the genitals, and if something's not
Yeah.
100% focused on the present, then there's a big break there. And so lots of things don't work if we're really focused on it. And so it's again needing to be really present and in your body, and focusing on arousal, because any other distracting thought is going to take you away from there. And so if there's worries about erections going away, they likely will.
Yeah.
Like self-fulfilling prophecies.
Yeah.
If you think and worried about it, then likely that's going to happen. It's like the one thing I always say, that if you focus really, really hard and try, it's not going to work. Like
Yeah.
you need to sort of just be present and let things go as they may, and enjoy the ride, and sort of be present with and focus on sensation and curiosity.
And there's a few different exercises that we can recommend to individuals or couples to try to build the capacity to get there, because it's, again, something that's easy to say but not so easy to do.
Yeah.
So there's something called sensate focus that we will go through and encourage people to try who may be struggling.
Okay. Wow. Guys, I am learning
Lots of
lots. Okay, so you have already provided me with a list of common questions that you've heard before from stroke survivors. So on behalf of everybody listening, I'm going to ask those questions, and I understand that some of them are going to be a lot harder to answer than others. Question 1. What will sex be like now?
Likely it'll be a little bit different, but different doesn't have to be bad. And I think that's the thing that people think, that if it is different, then there isn't possibility that you're going to be able to get the same enjoyment out of it. But that's not the case. Usually there's workarounds in finding new positions and new ways working around what your body can do, and that if you're willing to give it a good college effort, and try some new things, because that's what people want it to be the same as it was before by doing the same things that they did before,
Right.
and those two things don't always add up.
And maybe they can't do the same things they did before.
But they want to. Or
Yeah.
really angry about not being able to
Yeah.
do those things, and so trying to figure out, again, focusing on what you can do and working with that.
Right.
And sometimes when you're forced to try new things, what they say, like when a door closes, a window opens. Maybe it's the other way around, but
One door closes, another one opens. It doesn't have to be a window or a door.
it's something that you do hear people say, is that certain parts of sex after a disability or stroke do get better because you're forced to work on those parts more that maybe you could just ignore.
Like sensuality, so things with touch and maybe some pre-sex, foreplay type things.
Right.
Like more of that focus on building, setting up the environment, and communication and intimacy. So, because they've had to be so vulnerable with each other, because there's been so many changes that can bring people closer together, and they just have that intense feeling towards each other that's positive, that can add to the experience that, they didn't have before. It was purely like physical, let's get something done, but now, they have a really strong connection.
Right.
Or that strong connection is a bigger part of the puzzle.
Wow. Okay. What can a person do to improve their self-confidence or self-esteem when there are challenges with sex and intimacy after stroke?
So previously in one of the stroke groups that we did with you, we asked this question to a few of the participants that were there that day.
Yeah.
And so we want to credit them, because we're coming at this from a clinician's point
Right.
of view, but there's much to be said for seeing what's worked for other peers. So what those individuals said were, to take a little bit of a risk and be vulnerable and to try to do things that feel good for you. So for one woman, it was dancing in her living room.
Right.
Maybe she wasn't quite ready to go out and dance at a club or a bar or wherever, but to take that first step and to start dancing in your living room and put a smile on your face and listen to a song you like and do something that feels good for you. Another individual said that for them it was going and taking their dog for a walk and walking down the street and smiling at someone, smiling at a stranger, saying hello to a stranger. So connecting with others.
In non-threatening way. I mean, people can choose, people are going to react to you. Like, I say hi to people and some people say hello back and some people look at you like you've got a third eye. So, but if you're doing that on a more regular basis and practicing eye contact, that kind of does help you when you're talking to someone at a coffee shop, or maybe even giving you some courage of taking a risk and, you know, talking to that stranger while you're waiting for the bus.
Yeah.
It's kind of non-threatening way of connecting with people.
And then I also wanted to speak to the fact that self-confidence is about having a reasonable degree of confidence that you're able to do certain tasks or achieve certain things in life. So you know that you can get up in the morning, take a shower, drive to work and do your job, and you know that those things are probably going to go okay. So after having a stroke, all of those daily activities very well may be impacted. And so your confidence and your ability to do those everyday types of things, that's generally for most people going to be impacted to some degree. But then there's self-esteem. And so self-esteem comes into things with the judgment that you have and that you put onto your ability to do those things. So does it change my inherent value or worth as a person because I can't maybe walk to the store and go and get groceries on my own anymore? So for some people, depending on their life experiences and the family and their values that they had when they grew up and all those other things, it's going to be easier to overcome that than others. So again, it's easy to say to dance, do things that feel good for you, but if you maybe had some deeper issues before your stroke and you didn't have a very good foundation to have a good sense of self-esteem, this may be a really big blow for you and something that may be really difficult for you to overcome. And for those individuals, we can usually get a sense that might be happening from that overseeing them a few times, and that's where we'll refer out to counseling or psychology to help tease some of that apart and say, you know, just because you can't do something doesn't mean that you are a bad person.
You're not worthy, And a lot of that can be tied in with mood.
Yes.
Right, so you can have better days and feel better and have more self-esteem when you're feeling more upbeat. If having a couple days where you're feeling quite low in your mood, your ability to feel your worthiness and be able to get kind of bumped down if anything goes wrong is much greater if you're not feeling so great. So mood plays a huge part.
Yeah, again, it's looking at things really holistically, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Can having sex cause another stroke?
I think that's a common question that people do ask. There's worries about, well, I've had a stroke now, you know, this is something that's, you know, physical.
Yeah.
I mean, it also depends on why you had the stroke and what were the underlying medical conditions. I know with heart attacks, doctors will say that if you're able to climb a flight of stairs and do that without any adverse effects, then you should be able to engage in sex. And so, you know, it's unlikely.
Right.
But if there's a really strong concern, then, you know, speaking to your doctor about it would be my biggest advice.
I mean, generally, if you don't have any other physical restrictions that have been prescribed to you from your physician, sex should be safe, because the amount of physical exertion that sex is going to take is, like Shay said, going to be similar to walking up a couple flights of stairs, depending on what you're doing. We assume most people aren't swinging from the chandelier. But, a legitimate concern that many have, but very rare that it would be contraindicated.
Right.
And likely you would know because your doctor would be saying, don't do this, don't do that.
Worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Ask your doctor.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, what can a person do to maintain a healthy relationship when there are challenges with sex and intimacy?
Well, I think when there's challenges with sex and intimacy, it becomes the elephant in the room if it's not discussed. So it's quite easy for people to avoid intimacy altogether with fear of things not working or having things, if things haven't worked, then they're not wanting to be put in that situation again. Self-preservation. And so, there's couples that will well, I'll go to bed first so that there won't be an opportunity. So I can pretend I'm sleeping when my partner comes in. I think being able to talk about the fears, what's going on, allows that openness, and so then it isn't just the element in the room, and we can kind of get to the nitty-gritty of what's going on and being able to communicate about it. But it is that pattern of avoidance that can happen, and it can be a really tough thing in a relationship, right? As if you're avoiding things and you lose all the niceties of intimacy. Then if the sex is gone, then oftentimes the flirting, the affection, the communication throughout the day that might be a bit more playful, or a hand holding or a hug, all of that starts to go away too, and then people feel very isolated.
Yeah.
And I think when people have gotten to a certain point, it's coming back into it and taking small steps. So it's going to be difficult to go from 0 to 100. So oftentimes we'll recommend things like, let's start out by holding hands, cooking dinner together, maybe then after a little while spooning in bed.
Or providing massages, so just intimate touch that doesn't have to be connected with sex per se.
Yeah.
A lot of people, when we see them, it's not the sex part that's the big deal. Like some people are saying it's okay, but I'm missing the fact that we can't connect in any way. So that if that's not happening, then there's no touch, and that's almost more devastating than intercourse.
Yeah.
Going away. So it is about the intimacy and being able to touch and be close. And that little, not wanting to imply, and so not wanting to put pressure, and so then there's this awkwardness in how people interact with each other, and then they feel isolated in a partnership.
Seems like communication is key there, right?
You are right.
You are correct. Yeah.
You are learning. You're good student.
Yes. So much today. Okay, after stroke, how is fertility affected?
For females, it shouldn't be, as long as you're still with an childbearing age.
Yeah.
I mean, depending on the reason that you had your stroke, and if there was a clotting factor associated there, of course you may be higher risk for certain contraceptives that contain estrogen. So you may need to talk to your doctor about that, and if you may be at a higher risk during a pregnancy for stroke.
And there are clinics here in Vancouver that do that. So at Women's Hospital there is the complex contraception clinic. So with anybody that has any complex medical issue that other practitioners might be a bit worried about putting you on something, they're not as scared, and they'll run through all of the scenarios and be able to provide you with something. There is also the maternal fetal medicine program at Women's Hospital. So if there is any sort of clotting disorder that might put you at increased risk for pregnancy, there's a whole team to be able to assess that, and things about medications and stuff to pay attention to if you're wanting to conceive. For men, obviously ejaculation would be the main issue. So if the type of stroke you had, there's decreases in sensation, making ejaculation a bit more difficult, then that is something that can affect fertility. But I'm part of the sperm retrieval clinic, so we do procedures to get sperm out. So as long as you're making it, there's a way
you can get it
to
out.
have a baby. Yeah.
Okay. And now we spoke a little bit about the conversation that we had previously with some stroke survivors, and so this actually is a question that came from one of them. I don't even know how to flirt with someone now. How do I meet people?
Well, I think that goes back to sort of some of the things you had talked about before, is just practicing, right?
Yeah.
So taking chances of, saying hello to strangers on the street, and just
baby steps.
Baby steps.
So it's not going out and sitting at a hotel bar and being like, hey, did you come here alone tonight? What brings you here? It's
Good.
Let's start with practicing, tuning up our social skills in general.
Right.
So maybe, you've been in an extended period of rehab and focusing on your health, and you're a little bit out of practice of just talking about what you've been doing in your day and life and what's happening in the world. So it's building up that confidence again by going out with the intent of maybe just making a new friend, or maybe not even making a friend, maybe just having a conversation with someone that you have just met. And those little steps will help build your confidence.
And I think the biggest thing when there's been something like a stroke that's happened, people tend to identify themselves as the stroke, right? That sort of takes over, and that, how to disclose it, how to talk about it, forgetting that you're a person, like a stroke has happened to you, but that is not your full personality, and sort of focusing on all the areas of life that are still part of you and that are still important, and sort of changing that script inside your head, that trying to connect with people by using those hobbies, by using those interests, the things that are important to you before a stroke. Maybe some of that has changed, but maybe some of it hasn't either. I'm kind of focusing on that.
And this question also came from a stroke survivor. If I do meet someone, when do I tell them about my stroke?
Yeah, this question is a tricky one. I think at its core, it's really about being vulnerable and being able to trust someone. And how vulnerable are you willing to be, and do you want to be? For some, their stroke might be quite readily, visibly apparent. And so that may be a bit of a different scenario than someone where it's a little bit more of an invisible disability that they have. Generally,
there isn't a set, like, we don't have a this is the thing, the formula, this is how you decide this is when you should do it. It is really about taking in, like, when does it feel right, like when is there a sort of a natural segue into something. I think we had talked about this in our last conversation, was like, in a conversation, I think it was something you were trying to role play with me, remember?
Yes.
And I wasn't catching on. But it was just like talking to someone about what's going on for you in your life, and saying, I'm just going to a job interview today. I haven't been working because I had, 6 months ago I had a stroke.
Right.
And so it doesn't have to be this thing where you have to divulge this like most embarrassing secret. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so but it's also how you feel about it, right? If you're worried about how people are going to react about this piece of information, the way you present it and your apprehension about it is going to come through.
Yeah.
And it's going to be seeming more scary than if it is just, I had a stroke 6 months ago.
Yeah. If you feel very uncomfortable, then the person that you're speaking with is likely going to sense that and see that and feel uncomfortable as well.
Feel like you're hiding something.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a deep, dark secret.
No.
It is something that happened, but it can open up doors. It can provide communication. The experiences that you have had can make you more empathetic, more vulnerable, more easy to connect to.
Yeah.
That can be a positive side to communication.
Absolutely.
Right? That you've had something that's happened that a lot of people don't have. Haven't had the experience with, and you've survived, and you have a different sense of the world now.
Yeah.
And that can be something that is good.
Yeah. And just to clarify, so all of these questions, like a lot of them are these the kinds of questions that people come to you with? So not everybody comes to you and says, I want to have sex and I don't know how to do it. They come with these questions about their self-esteem and relationships and communication.
Some people have some very specific,
right.
Like, this is what's going on for me, I want to know about this, but then in a conversation, a whole bunch of other stuff comes up like this. And some people, if they're just early days when they come to talk to us, we can start bringing that up, and so then the hamster starts going in the wheel and starts thinking of things. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a specific question, but just thinking about how this might affect, all the different aspects of your life, where this is the stuff that we do more of this than we do, of the medication type related, device type related.
It's a bit
things.
more time intensive to speak with someone about the psychosocial issues that may be happening than how to fix their erection or how to help with vaginal lubrication or sensation. So
sometimes we can't even get there unless we've had some discussion about the self-esteem and feeling worthy to even be asking about these things, and feeling like, well, my fatigue is so much that I can't even think how I would be able to do any of this, or sometimes you need to get through some of that other stuff before we can get to the nuts and bolts.
Yes. But as Shay mentioned, we really come from a health promotion standpoint.
Right.
So we don't want to see people when things have become so dire and so bad and they've been left for so long that they feel like there's no hope. We really encourage people to see us at the beginning of their journey in their rehab, to see what can I do to lift this area of my life up and really enhance it, and not wait for things to crumble. Yeah.
And do doctors refer? Like, do you I imagine you just must be so busy.
Well, people have a lot of, there's a lot of concern in this area, but it's how to approach it, right? So there are barriers in terms of needing to ask someone to provide you a referral, or having to have that conversation with someone to then get a referral, and then that practitioner to know where to refer. So it depends on where you are. We're pretty lucky. GF Strong is rehab hospital, so most stroke survivors, some, but not all, if they're from the Lower Mainland, will come through and then from there be seen by us. But if you're somewhere else, maybe not the case. So yes, we're busy, but it's not crazy, and we'll have people who are interested but not quite ready to talk about it. So we'll get a lot of referrals, and then when it comes down to it, kind of get a bit of cold feet. There is that worry that what happens if I talk to someone and it still doesn't get better?
Right.
What happens if I take this step and I can't, and I just realize this is just going to be the way it is? And so there's sometimes fear that kind of holds people back from having that conversation, because it's much more than just, going to a specialist about
PT or an OT.
Yeah, and there's it's attached to a lot of morals and values, and if somebody may be religious with certain religions, there's attachments that way. So there's many different reasons why it may be really difficult for someone to talk about it, but certainly we take referrals from all over and can do phone consults as well, as we've mentioned, and are happy to see new clients. So,
and we're gonna put your email addresses and your phone numbers up at the end. If that's
fine.
okay. Yeah, perfect. It's good you said yes. Okay, so then probably the most common question, or one of the most common questions, is what can be done about changes to sexual function? So I would love to hear about specific things that have worked for stroke survivors that you've worked with, what the options are.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
It's not super simple, but
Well, I'm thinking maybe generally, like, are there drugs that can help? I know there are devices that we're going to talk about that can help. So what are some of the areas of things that can help?
Well, usually with a stroke, there's some cardiovascular influences, and so if we're just speaking about erectile function, then absolutely medications are something that. So we talk about medications, injections. Those are like for erection enhancement.
So most people have heard of Viagra is a big one, the blue pill, and that's a class of medications called PDE5 inhibitors. So with that type of medication, generally you need to be able to get some type of erection on your own, and then that medication will help to sustain that erection. Can be usually quite effective in men who have had stroke.
It also depends on what erectile function was happening
before.
So
if there was a long-standing history of diabetes, that may be a bit more difficult to address, because then there's some nerve function implications.
And vascular.
But there's also an injection that can be a workaround for that. So where the pills don't work, there's an injection that can be a little bit scary when you first think about it. It's a very small needle, about the size of an insulin needle,
It is an insulin syringe.
that is injected into the side of the penis, usually by either the individual themselves or their partner.
Right.
We provide education sessions
Good.
on
How to do that appropriately.
Yes,
Yes.
Believe it or not, it's generally virtually painless
Uh-huh.
with good technique and quite effective.
Right.
It was on the market before. It was the gold standard before medications like Viagra
Okay.
were on board.
Huh.
And it's also a bit more cost effective. So when we talk about medications, it also, there's limitations in terms of finances.
Yeah.
So these medications aren't covered. They can be quite expensive. It seems so silly that there's a price put on, being sexual, but those are all things that we also need to think about. So the injections are a more affordable option that can often be covered through special authority
Okay.
requests and things like that. So medications are one part of it, but it's also like how to access your body. So being able to, get stimulation and, sometimes when there's decreased sensation that can happen after a stroke, trying to, figure that out, and vibrators and devices and things like that can be something that is quite helpful. It's a recommendation, but we know that some people aren't always super comfortable about that initially, and so really try to gauge that. We don't sort of throw a bunch of them on the table and freak people out, but we do know that it is a really effective way to create a physiological response to get blood flow to that area, whether you're male or female.
Right.
And it is a good way to sort of check in on that area for yourself.
Particularly if you've had sensation changes, right? Maybe before you had no need for extra stimulation or a vibrator. It's not something that you would have really incorporated into your sexual practice, but now things have changed, so why not try something new and see what might work?
Right.
And as Shay said, there's often a lot of strings attached to things like sex toys. I don't think so much
To be super crazy
for the newer generation.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more. People are a little bit more open, the younger
Yeah.
generation. But for other individuals, it may be something where they thought of, someone more promiscuous is who's going to be using that.
I've never
or
needed that
dirty,
before.
yeah.
Yeah, it may be a little bit taboo.
Yeah.
But as Shay said, physiologically, it makes sense. You're adding a little bit more stimulation to an area where maybe the sensation isn't the same, creating a really great response, and it can be fun, and it can bring a lot of novelty in a relationship and get sparks going sometimes as well, if you're willing to come at it from a place of open-mindedness and experimentation and lightheartedness.
I mean, we do use so many technological tools, right? We used computers, we use alarm clocks, we use so many things to kind of help us for the day. This is just another option in terms of helping recover
And there's
your sexual function.
so many different
choices.
sexual devices available these days.
It's crazy, we can't even keep on top of what's coming out. There's so many new devices, almost like weekly.
Yeah.
Well, let's bring them over. Let's have a look at some of them.
Do you want me to grab them?
Yeah.
So this is just a small selection from our tickle trunk.
Tickle trunk.
And we are in no way endorsed by any company whatsoever. These are just a few devices that we personally thought could be useful for individuals with disabilities or those who've had stroke.
No one's
And-
paying.
And do you get these? Do you get these at any store where I can buy devices, or are they specially for people with disabilities?
Just in general.
These are just for the general population.
Okay.
Some device manufacturers will take into account that there are people differing abilities using these devices, so that's great. But these can generally be found online. A quick Google search.
Yeah.
There's many sex shops within Canada that deliver very anonymously as well, for anyone who may be worried about friends, neighbors, kids seeing what's coming to them in the mail.
That being said, too, the people in this place, I know, people in these shops are quite knowledgeable,
Right.
and so there is that risk of buying something online and really not knowing what you're getting into, and then spending a lot of money on something that isn't really
Right.
right for you.
Absolutely.
So there is some value in going and it's not one of these peep shows on Granville Street, right?
Sure,
Where there are classier establishments where there's really knowledgeable people to talk to, and can put you in line with something that fit for your situation. And that's not necessarily adapted, right? Like this one is a vibrator, but it can go on your finger. I don't know if you can see that. And so for hand function being difficult, then it just stays there.
Right.
And this isn't anything that's been adapted. This is just something that's on the market.
That is already so useful for there's so many things that people need something that attaches to their hand.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. And there's lots of different reasons why people might need that, right? In terms of, it's not just stroke, but for arthritis or, anything that kind of limits your ability to use your hand.
And again, this vibrator could be used for either a couple, or it could be used for male or female. For men, generally that vibration can feel good on the gland, so towards the end of the penis, on the underside.
People, when you talk about vibrators for men, they automatically think it has to be an internal type thing, and that vibrators have to look like phalluses. And these, you can see, like, they don't. This one doesn't look like, nothing really looks like penis. This is a This is a back massager. This is
it looks like a microphone.
Karaoke.
It's a back massager.
It is a back massager.
So you can buy it at Walmart.
You can.
You can buy it anywhere.
Yeah, online.
Magic wand.
Attach a magic wand. I don't know. I'm probably dating myself, but Sex in the City. This was Samantha's toy.
Okay.
She also used it for. I think there was one episode where. Anyways. She used it to help soothe the baby in terms of like the rocking chair. Yeah, anyways, that was just my own. You can take that out. But they don't all have to look like penises, right?
All right, what's that one?
Okay, so this one, it's called the Tenga. This is a male vibrator. The way that this works is inside there is a jelly type, not jelly, but
it's like silicone.
Like a silicone soft feeling that's, I guess, supposed to probably mimic what the inside of a vagina might feel like. So this can be useful for men who may fatigue easily or who may have limited grip in their hand or limited arm function. So the penis is inserted inside, you squeeze the sides, it creates a suction. And on this particular model, you press a button and it's going starts to vibrate, and so you can either place it on a pillow or just hold it there.
Right.
And then
it does lots of different.
Yeah, it has different settings in terms of the patterns and rhythms, and then it comes apart, and you can wash it.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Good.
So again, this can be used for an individual, but it can also be incorporated into play with your partner.
Yeah.
So something that may be useful for some stroke survivors out there, or just for anyone who wants to have fun. And then this is another. Go ahead.
And again, that's just something you could buy in any shop. Any
Tenga.
sex shop.
Tenga is quite a big popular brand out there for sexual devices.
And what's it called? If I was wanting to Google it, Tenga.
The Tenga Flip. Although the Tenga Flip comes in models that both vibrate and don't vibrate, and this is the vibrating model.
Yeah.
And this would be something that would be just a sleeve, so it would be something that the penis would go in.
Similar.
And then it's the same sort of inside flexible silicone.
You got to do a little
thing,
more work.
You got to do
more.
more.
Yeah.
You have to do all of the work, really. It doesn't have any sort of vibration, but these are also things that can be used for self-stimulation.
And what is that called?
Oh, you stumped me. The box is over on the other side. Well, this would just be like what do you call it? A self-stimulation sleeve?
Yeah.
Masturbation sleeve?
Male
Just
masturbation
thinking
sleeve.
people might want to Google, so give them a head start.
I think Tenga makes these as well.
Okay. Yeah. And what's the green one?
This is done by Fun Factory, and this is intended towards a male audience as a male vibrator. And what I love and what we love about this device is that it can be used with a flaccid penis or an erect penis. So we know that some men erections aren't going to be happening, but that doesn't mean that you can't experience pleasure, and that doesn't mean that you can't actually orgasm or ejaculate.
Right.
So, but this also can be used with an erect penis. So this just turns on, vibrates, The penis can sit inside.
Yeah.
You can use some lubrication, move it around. It can also be used for a female partner as well.
I can see that.
Has in the handle a little bit of a grip here that may, for some, make things a little bit easier to clasp onto. So just another option out there.
And that's a male vibrator.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you want to explain this one? The womanizer?
Yeah, not our favorite name for a device.
I like the color though.
Yeah, so this is
It's a clitoral stimulation device, right?
yeah, it doesn't actually vibrate. What it does is it's meant to be placed directly over the clitoris,
Okay.
which we know has many nerve endings.
Similar to a penis.
Similar to a penis, yeah. They call the clitoris like the female penis, I guess. And so for those with some sensation changes, this may be something that works to create a little bit more stimulation and arousal over the clitoral area. Some people really like it. Some will say that it's a little bit too much or too targeted to that area. So unfortunately, you can't really try these devices. You just got to take a guess at what's going to work for you. But
So don't buy it secondhand.
no, I wouldn't suggest that.
And then, I think this is Juju. There's another brand. They're just really nice. They're coated in a really nice silicone, so it has a nice feel to it. It just feels nice.
Okay, I
I
gotta
think
feel
I've
it.
used all, yeah, it's
Oh
like
yeah, it
kind
does
of
feel
squishy.
nice.
Actually, I'm just gonna get the box.
Nice.
Yeah, so they don't. I think this is just an example to show that it doesn't have to look like
Yeah.
a penis. They can be discreet.
Sure.
They're cordless, so rechargeable, and you can use. Yeah. Oh, what is it? Iroha.
So this is a Iroha brand, and they make some really nice, simple vibrators that, as Shay mentioned, the texture is really soft and feels
It just feels
just
it has a really
comfortable.
nice-
Yeah.
I mean, they aren't. They're expensive.
Yeah, and it is a little bit of a higher price point. You can get any type of price point with these toys. You will find that likely the quality will be a bit better the further up you go. So it really
Right.
depends on what you're
And
looking
also
for.
like sound. So I don't know. Like this one just sort of has a buzz.
Yeah, seems pretty
And so
mellow.
it's pretty quiet, but some of the other ones that are made of plastic can be a bit louder.
Right. And so I would imagine, not unlike speaking to you guys, if I was to go
Turn this
into
on.
one of these sex shops, the people are professional and knowledgeable. There's no judgment. They've heard it all before.
Yeah,
Yes.
I guess, to throw some of the bigger names out
Sure.
there, again, not endorsing, we haven't
Absolutely.
received any
Yeah.
free,
Financial.
but Women's Wear
Uh-huh.
on Commercial Drive is an establishment that's been around for a long time, and
There's Sexy Living in Coquitlam.
right,
There's not the Love Nest. One on Broadway here.
there's Honey's Gifts, which is another,
Gifts.
yes.
Okay.
They have a Canby Street location and a Gastown location, and then it used to be on Fifth and Brevard. No, it's on Broadway.
Art of Loving.
That's it. Thank you.
Art of Living.
Good thing you're
Right.
the next extension of my brain. The Art of Loving. So all of them are quite knowledgeable,
Okay.
and they know way more about these things than we do because they're in it every day. And they're.
I thought I heard one of them still going.
And
No,
then there's actually a website that we should
Yeah.
mention called Come As You Are. COMEASYOUAR.
Thank you
and
for
this-
spelling that out.
Yes. It is a website that has some information on sex toys and disabilities specifically.
Okay.
And that content, I believe, was written by Corey Silverberg, who
Yes,
Who's
I
a
think
bit
he
of
was
an
a part of the
advocate.
founder of the actual store, and then has since kind of.
yeah, and they have an online shop as well. Come As You Are.
Wow.
Yes.
Great. So my last question really
Can I put these
is
down?
Getting heavy.
heavy.
Heavy or just awkward? Now I start to talk with
Yes,
them.
I was just thinking.
You just
And
put
another
them-
thing.
just put them away. Yeah.
Okay. So my last question is for anybody who's watching, if they're they're wanting to have a further conversation with one of you. It's raised some new questions for them, or maybe a different way of looking at it, or maybe they're ready. How can people receive services from you guys?
So typically, I mean, we do require a doctor's referral. That being said, I think if, you know, there's a lot of people who don't have family doctors at the moment and not comfortable talking to walk-in doctors, I mean, you can contact us and we'll kind of figure out a way to manage, but it would be ideal, just because if there's any medication recommendations, because we're not doctors ourselves, we're nurses, that if there is anything that we want you to try or anything like that, that it is good to be able to have a doctor to fall back on in terms of of making sure that they can cover that part. We do have a doctor that we work with, but is obviously better for continuity of care if there is a physician involved.
So we do have referral forms found online on bch.ca.
Okay.
We can forward you that.
Yeah,
link,
I'll put the
perhaps.
link in. And so if I'm wanting, my first step would be to go to a doctor and ask for a referral to your service.
And it's called the Sexual Health Rehab Service.
Okay. And failing that, I could phone you or email you, and you could help me from there somehow get a referral.
Yeah.
To receive the service.
We don't want that to be a
Okay.
limiting factor of people not being able to get help because they don't have a primary care provider.
Okay.
But it would be ideal.
Yeah,
to come
sure.
that route.
Absolutely. And it's for anybody anywhere in BC.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And partners as well.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So that we will see people, stroke survivors, but also their partners.
Right.
And this includes the island and the Yukon.
Oh, and the Yukon. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, the Yukon uses BC Health Services.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Rachel and Shay, thank you so much. This has been a really great conversation. I appreciate your time.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you for having us.
Thanks for joining the conversation. You can download a referral form from the Vancouver Coastal Health website, vch.ca. You can visit the Sexual Health Rehab Services website, where they have tons of links and resources. Their website is scisexualhealth.ca. You can contact Rachel or Shay directly by phone or by email. We mentioned some shops and sites in this conversation. This is for your information only. We don't endorse or recommend any providers. Here are the websites. We have other programs and resources for young stroke survivors in BC. You can contact SRABC by phone, including a toll-free line. You can text us, you can email, or check out our website. Thanks again for joining the conversation, and we'll see you next time.